Who's ready for another incredible display of live artistry here? Very nice, very nice. Our next guest has drawn some of the most popular characters in comics, from Spider-Man, Young Justice, Deadpool, even President Barack Obama.
Yes.
And April 3rd, you'll take on one of the most popular new characters in Marvel's line, Cosmic Ghost Rider. Ladies and gentlemen, Todd Nauck.
Hey gang, thanks for coming out.
I got that date right. That's when you're.
That's right, April 3rd is when my issue comes out.
Before you start drawing, let's talk about that, because you're rather prolific and you've really been able to tackle so many different characters in comics. Cosmic Ghost Rider is a relatively new, nuts creation that, that the House of Ideas has come up with. And this series is kind of inserting him into various points in Marvel Comics history.
Yes, the full title is called Cosmic Ghost Rider Destroys Marvel History. And so each issue is drawn by a different artist. The series is written by Paul Scheer and Nick Giovannetti, who wrote a lot of Spider-Man Deadpool stuff. I got to work with them on that series. Issue 1 is Fantastic Four, drawn by Gerardo Sandoval, which is out now, I believe. And then my issue is issue 2, where Cosmic Ghost Rider inserts himself into key points of Spider-Man's history. So I'm getting to draw essentially Cosmic Ghost Rider versus Spider-Man throughout the ages.
Give us a hint. What key moments in Spider-Man history are we going to see?
We're going to see the black costume. We're going to see the death of a major character from Spider-Man's past, and we get to see a bit of Cosmic Ghost Rider getting in the middle of Peter and Mary Jane's relationship. We'll tease it with that.
Speaking of Spider-Man, we were talking before the segment, and you decided on a specific character to draw.
Yes.
Today, tell us the character you're going to draw for us today.
So today is my Into the Spider-Verse theme. I've been getting a lot of fans telling me I look a bit like Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse, so I went ahead and did a full Peter B. Parker cosplay. Got the boot. Left my web shooters at home, so there'll be no heroics today.
We really appreciate the commitment. This is commitment right here.
So I thought I'll draw an Into the Spider-Verse character. I was going to do Miles Morales, but my white gel pen ran out of ink, so I'm defaulting to my second favorite, Spider-Ham. Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham.
I'm all for it.
Go.
I'm here for Spider-Ham. Okay, so you're here, you have your artboard here.
Yeah.
What's the very first thing Todd Nauck does when he sits down to draw Spider-Ham?
Let's see. Spider-Ham is really fun because he is such a cartoony shape. So I'm start off with a lot of big circles. Let's see. Oh, there's my cameraman. Okay. So I start roughing in a general circle. I get really scribbly in my initial stages. I get really messy because I'm figuring out all the shapes. So I start with a basic circle, like I would for drawing a human head, and then start to add in the very pig-like features right away. Get the snout going, his cheeks, his ears, and then start to get in those Spider-Man lens eyes, the black and white eyes. So just start getting the rough shapes dropped in here, and I'm sure this will show up on the video a bit more once we start getting to the inks and color stage.
Well, a question for you, because Spider-Ham is such a unique character in his look. You got to be careful to not stray too far from the quote-unquote, design, right?
Yes, the established design, absolutely. What's fun about comics is that every artist can have their own style and flavor, but we all stick within that realm of believability of what has been established, so that the character is easily recognizable, but we can each give our own little take to it, our own little bit of flavor, which can really make it fun, which is one of the reasons why I love comics, is you grab 100 different Spider-Man comics, you'll have 100 different flavors, and you can pick the ones that appeal to you.
Now, obviously, Spider-Ham is a character that older fans really love, because he came out of nowhere in the 80s, almost like a joke.
Yep.
But he's incredibly, his fan base is really powerful, and of course, Into the Spider-Verse made him, even more popular.
Even more popular, yes.
With fans who never read those early issues back in the day.
As a kid in the 80s, I was all about Spider-Ham. Had every issue. Even had a fan letter printed in one of the issues. The first time my name appears in a Marvel comic is in a fan letter to the Spider-Ham letter column when I was 15 years old, back in the mid-80s. So
quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, it's like, this is just step one, everybody. So I've been a big Spider-Ham fan. So here now, all these years later, to see one of my favorite characters on the big screen, I never thought that would happen. I never thought Spider-Ham would ever get a chance to have that kind of exposure.
Look, many of us have had those moments where we've seen a character from our comics youth show up on screen, but Spider-Ham, if you had an office pool about 15 years ago to say which Marvel character is going to be on screen in an Oscar-winning movie, I'm pretty sure Spider-Ham would have been at the bottom of that list.
And you would have cleaned up if you placed your bet there.
You would have absolutely cleaned up. Do you remember what issue you had the letter in?
I can't remember the issue. I think it might be around issue 5 or 6. Yeah, because the series ran for about 13, 14 issues, I believe. So it was in that first third of his run, I believe.
Do you get a lot of requests now for Spider-Ham commissions?
I haven't yet. No, I've done a few. I've done a couple, but not a lot at this time. But who knows, now with the movie and people now know that Spider-Ham is one of my favorites, I might start getting more.
You attend a lot of conventions like
I do, yes.
Like Emerald City, and you do a ton of commissions.
Yes.
Which is the character that you get asked for the most?
I'd probably say the most is Spider-Man. He's iconic, he's, world-renowned.
Red or black costume?
Red costume. Classic, red and blues, Spider-Man, I'd say is probably the most requested. I get a lot of Young Justice characters since I did 5 years on the Young Justice series back in the late 90s, early 2000s, but I think Spider-Man still wins out.
Do you kind of wish that they'd ask you more for the black costume, because that's a lot easier to
Yeah, it's just 2 white eyes and then a lot of black.
It's an outline and then a lot of ink.
Of course, then I have to keep refilling my black Copic markers, so then that takes me just as long as drawing the red and blue costume. So now that I've got the basic pencil lines in, I can start going in with the my microns and other tools.
Yeah, we're already seeing the face and the shape come into play.
Yes.
Okay.
So now I'm going to start putting in the finished lines to start to really flesh out the details of the character.
Todd, what kind of drawing materials do you regularly use? What pens, pencils are in your bag of tricks? And by the way, your bag of tricks is full of tons of drawing materials.
Yes, yeah. I love using all sorts of types of stuff. For my basic penciling, I use a mechanical pencil that you could get at an office supply store with an HB lead. Which is not too hard, not too soft. It's that middle range, so it's good for getting just the right darkness of detail without getting too smudgy. For inking, I use the Pigma Micron pens or Copic multi-liners, varying sizes. I'm starting with the 0.8 size tip. It's a bit of a thicker tip for those initial contour lines. I use the 0.1 and the 0.05 multi-liners for finer details. And then I like to use a Pentel Pocket brush pen, which we'll see me use more of when I start to put in the blacks of the lenses, the trim around the lenses. And I also like to use brush pens for certain textures. If I have to draw rocks or trees or bark if I'm drawing Groot. So different tools for different techniques or textures.
One thing that you're really good at, aside from drawing and answering questions from annoying people like me, as you're sitting here trying to work, is using your social media to interact with fans.
Yeah.
You share a lot of your art on there. How important is that for today's modern artist to really engage their fans through something like Instagram, which must be a great tool for you?
Yeah, I love Instagram because it's all about pictures, and pictures are, as an artist, that's my jam. So I love Instagram. It's my most used social media, my most followed of all my social media. So it's great because it allows me to reach fans of the same thing I'm a fan of, comics, superheroes, things like that, all across the world, all sorts of age groups. I'll have people come up saying, I follow you on Instagram. That's my most popular thing. I follow you on Instagram, I watch your YouTube videos. That has been a very common phrase I get at conventions now these past 3, 4, 5 years. So social media has been great in interacting with the fans, letting them know where I'll be at, what I'm doing. As a freelance artist, I got to promote myself. So for those, every little thing I want people to know so they don't miss out. So yeah, social media is key, and I'm reaching new fan bases through that, especially the young people.
Which is the fan base you hear the most from? Is it the Young Justice crowd? Because as you mentioned earlier, you drew the book for 5 years. You're very identifiable with those characters, and now they're having a resurgence with the return of the animated series.
Yeah, season 3.
The launch of Bendis's Wonder Comics with Young Justice.
Yeah.
Is that the fan base that you hear the most from?
That and Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man's such a popular character that, especially now with the, the current movies, the MCU movies and Into the Spider-Verse, I hear a lot from Spider-Man fans. If I post a picture on Spider-Man, tons of likes. Just, they ratchet way up. There is a strong Young Justice fan base, absolutely. They've been strong and vocal for 20 years now. But the Spider-Man stuff, I think, is really where I get the most interaction with my postings.
Speaking of Spider-Man, you drew the most popular comic of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man, it was 583.
583, that's right.
With Obama on the cover.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure there's enough pressure as it is in comics because of deadlines.
Yes.
And hey, you gotta wake up and make the donuts, and you gotta draw the comics, right?
Exactly.
But did you feel more pressure knowing you had to draw a cover with the president of the United States on it?
Yes, that was an exciting time because, I mean, Barack Obama had just been elected for his first term. The country was Obama crazy, and so anything with Obama on it, people were buying. So when I got that assignment to draw the story of Spider-Man meets Barack Obama, and how that came about, in case people didn't know, is when Barack Obama had done an interview with, I think, Spin magazine, saying growing up he was a big comic book fan, and Conan the Barbarian and Spider-Man were his favorite characters. And that's what gave Marvel the idea of, was like, well, we own Spider-Man, let's have this newly elected president meet his hero. So that's how that story came about. So when I was offered that job, I started working on that 5-page story, I knew, it's like, this is going to get coverage on all the news outlets. If the death of Captain America and the return of Barry Allen Flash is getting coverage on CNN, this is going to blow up. And so I told my comic shop, bump up your orders on 583. And my wife's like, no, don't do that. They'll be stuck with a bunch of copies. It's like, no, they won't.
Oh, you have little faith.
And boy, they were like, thanks for giving us a heads up, because they were the only shop in SoCal that had extra copies of that. Because it was hard to get that first printing, because it was added on to a comic that was already solicited.
You knew.
So it's like, I knew this is going to blow up big. And it was a lot of fun. It was a complete honor. And it's probably the most read Spider-Man story or comic book story of my career because of the Obama train.
Compared to the usual vetting process of when you turn in your pages and the editors look it over and whoever else looks at the artwork and the covers and say, okay, we signed off on it, it's ready to go get printed. Did extra eyes come into play here?
Yeah. Marvel was very, they had some guidelines for me. It's like, make sure he looks, heroic. We're not doing a political cartoon or caricature here. Be really respectful, which I was like totally on board with that. And they definitely had some extra eyes on everything we were putting together, so that it was, a good product, respectful, and but also, the Marvel magic and pulse pounding sort of story and style. So, but yeah, they didn't like micromanage me. Fortunately, they definitely allowed for the creative freedom, and we were able to get the donuts made in time for it to come out for that Wednesday before the inauguration.
A lot of artists don't feel comfortable doing likenesses of people because it's a challenge.
Yes.
It's easier for them to draw a Spider-Ham or an Iron Man or a character that isn't based on a quote-unquote real person.
Yeah.
You didn't have any qualms about that?
I didn't. I don't mind drawing likenesses if I'm in my studio. At a convention, I'd rather not draw, a Star Wars character, trying to draw Harrison Ford or Carrie Fisher. It just takes too much time to try to capture that likeness. But if I'm in my studio, sequestered by myself, totally put brain onto page, not a lot of other hubbub going on, I'm able to really focus and capture that. So yeah, I've gotten to draw Mayor Bloomberg for a Spider-Man story. I got to draw a couple other, politicians with, we did a 4-page prequel to our Spider-Man Obama story, which is how Peter Parker got into the inauguration. So they added that as a special bonus for a trade paperback. And so he encounters John McCain and, why am I blanking on the vice president's name at the time? Biden, thank you. So in the 5-page story, Barack Obama comes bringing his limo crashing in to stop the chameleon who is posing as Barack Obama, because the plot was Chameleon's going to try to get himself sworn in as president, and then he would be president. So he had assumed Barack Obama's form. And so when Barack Obama comes crashing in, it's just who was driving the limo. This 4-page story reveals that Biden was driving the limo action style, crashing into the inauguration. So I got to draw a lot of different, public figures after that Spider-Man Obama comic.
Let's tell people who may not know how your career started about your big break in comics, because it involved Rob Liefeld.
Yes. Growing up as a kid in the 1980s, I realized I wanted to be a comic book artist fairly young, freshman in high school, 14 years old, after I made my first homemade mini comic book. So much fun.
Were you sketching all the time in school?
All the time. Earliest memories were of drawing. As a little kid, just scribbling in a circle. That was one of my earliest memories of putting pencil to paper and loving making lines and things come to life on the page. Started reading comics in 8th grade, started making my own mini comics in 9th grade, and realized this is what I want to do for a career. I want to be a comic book artist. So I started to teach myself how to do that, because I lived in a tiny East Texas town, bought my comic shops at a grocery store on a spinner rack, so no one I could really talk to or get information from, aside from reading Marvel Age magazine or Comic Scene magazine. So after high school, I started going to comic book conventions, showing my portfolio, getting a lot of brutal critiques, a lot that I had to learn and fix. But I kept making mini comics. I started making mini comics again while in art school. That's when I created a concept called Wild Guard, which was a reality TV superhero team back in the 1990s, before reality TV got big, when Cops and MTV's Real World were the only two.
You were on the cutting edge.
Yes, it's like
reality television.
That's how I got the idea. I watched Cops, loved fan of the show. It's like, what if cameras followed cops around, or superheroes around instead of cops? So that's how Wild Guard was born. So I made these Wild Guard mini comics and shared them with my art school friends who also wanted to work in comics, who are a few quarters behind me. And one of my buddies took my mini comics, unbeknownst to me, and I'd already graduated. I'd left Texas, moved to Pennsylvania, and he calls me up and says, oh, I was at the Houston convention just last week, and I was talking to Dan Fraga, and he was an artist who worked for Rob Liefeld, drew a comic book called Bloodstrike. And I'm like, oh, you're hanging with Fraga? Oh, that's really cool. And he goes, yeah, I kind of showed him your mini comics. I'm like, you son of a, you betrayed me. I said, never show these to anyone. He goes, he really liked them. I'm like, what? He said he wants to take
Thank you. You're like, thank you.
I realized he goes, he wants to take them back to show them to Rob. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I'd been sending out my samples to every studio, Marvel, DC, Valiant, all the Image Comics studios.
So he's already started Extreme Studios. This is what, 94?
94, yeah. So it was January 94, getting rejection letters from everybody. And now all of a sudden my art's being taken to Rob personally. 3 days later I get a phone call, and it's Rob saying, saw your mini comics, dig what you do, I want you to come to California to work for me. So 2, 3 months later, I packed up and left Pennsylvania and stepped off the plane in Anaheim, California, and started drawing. He had a comic series ready for me to go that next day, Bad Rock and Company.
What was your first, what was it?
Bad Rock and Company. It was a 6-issue miniseries where Bad Rock from Youngblood would team up with different characters in the Image universe, like Grifter from Wildcats, character from Stormwatch. The Pit was our first issue, Dale Keown's The Pit. And that's what got me started. Then Rob just started giving me Team Youngblood, Supreme, and then I took over the New Men series. So I did a lot. I worked on almost every title he was putting out at the time, either for an issue or a run. I did that for 2.5 years.
What was that experience like, breaking into the comics business with one of the biggest names in the business at the time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right when Image, had peaked and selling massive amounts of copies.
Yes.
What was that like in that studio?
I was thrilled. I was and still am a big Rob Liefeld fan. Loved his work on New Mutants. Very excited to work for Rob Liefeld. Definitely a hero of mine. And so the fact that he wanted me to come work for him is just like, this is amazing. So very excited to go out there. And the bullpen was just a bunch of guys.
Were you all actually in the same
We're all in the
studio?
same, yeah, some guys had offices, like some of the inkers and some of the pencilers who had been there longer, but all those new guys, we were in the bullpen. And it was just cranking out pages, shooting Nerf guns, right? We were all in our early 20s, just goofing off and creating comics. It was such a wild time. They had a ping pong table in the middle of the bullpen. We'd set up a Hot Wheels track, racing car. It's like, I don't know how we got anything done, but we definitely had a lot of fun. And we were up on the 10th floor of this office building, so we're all in there in our rock and roll or superhero t-shirts, shorts, denim shirts, because it's the early 90s, mid 90s, getting on the elevator with all these, straight-laced bankers and investors. They'd get on and kind of give us weird looks as they get up on floor 7 and we're heading up to floor 10. It's like, see you guys. We're going to play with Nerf guns and make some comic books.
You obviously could draw at that point like a pro because he hired you.
Yeah.
But what did you learn about storytelling during that time at Extreme?
Yeah, well, with Rob's about big, exciting shots, big action, big energy, big excitement. And that's what I really learned from him. He'd sit down with me with my layouts and he says, okay, we like what you got here tells the story solidly. He goes, but let's wow the reader. Take this shot of Badrock, make it bigger. Make these panels smaller so we get a big shot of Badrock, because that's what we want to see when we buy the comic. We want a big shot of that character. That's what inspires us young artists. We see a big cool shot of Spider-Man, Batman. It inspires the young artist to draw. So bring that to the pages. What's that?
Amplification.
Yes. Yeah. It's just cool. It's exciting. It's what you're putting down your money for to see is, you know, your hero in all their glory. So he really taught me how to really pump up the jam.
Another stellar 90s reference.
Yes.
From you.
For those who are into
done.
Technotronic, that's.
Let's give people a quick update on where you're at in the drawing here.
Yeah, so I'm just finishing putting in the webs on Spidey's or Spider-Ham's. I guess technically he's a Spidey on his costume here. Which as a kid I thought I had no idea. How does any artist draw this web pattern? It's got to be impossible. And but once I started to learn the pattern for it and thought of it like an oscillating fan, how you have the center wires and then the circular wires that go around, that's kind of how I'd approach it. Drawing the main frame and then do the circle around, just keep it going around. It became really like Zen for me. It's so relaxing, oddly enough.
I'm sure, you know, there are a lot of comic artists who would disagree with you on that, and that's why it's no coincidence that some of the biggest names in comics history didn't draw Spider-Man all that often.
Yeah.
Because of the costume, right? Kirby didn't draw a ton of Spidey.
Right.
John Buscema, who could draw anything.
Yeah.
And anatomically perfect, he didn't draw a lot of Spider-Man because it's the webbing, right? Because it's hard to make it a consistent look.
It can be, yeah. But one thing I learned about it is not only is it kind of became relaxing, it was a great cipher, a great tool to use to show the form and mass of Spider-Man. If you get the webs to curve in the right way, it shows off the musculature of his arms, the forearms, the chest. It's like, round them out, show the volume of the character with these web lines. They serve a purpose more, they can serve a purpose, I should say, more than just a cool look to his design, that they can really convey mass.
Who are some of the artists that, in your time reading Spider-Man, that you think captured that best?
But I'd say, gosh, anyone who got big on Spider-Man. It's like McFarlane, Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, Rick Leonardi, some of my favorites that inspired me.
Rick Leonardi's a very underrated artist.
He's one of my top 4 influences. He is awesome. He was at the Long Beach Con last month. I got a chance to actually tell him, dude, you influenced a young Todd Nauck back in the day. You're one of my top 4 influences. And he was gracious, but yeah, love his work. The way he could move a character across the page was just beautiful. So, but then the Romita Senior, Romita Junior, they, I think, really set a really solid standard. And of course, going all the way back to Ditko, sure. he is like the man.
Spidey's like Batman in that he's always had incredible artists. Ross Andrew is another one.
Yes.
You know, for me, that was one of the first ones I saw, and he was incredible at it. You mentioned the Romitas. I mean, obviously, to a lot of people, Romita Senior is the definitive Spidey guy. Yeah. But yeah, he's always been fortunate to have fortune. I mean, he's typically the best-selling character from Marvel, so he's probably got all the artists lining up at the door. Hey, I'll draw him.
Yeah.
I'll draw all the webs you want.
Totally.
Another property that you're a big fan of, big fan, the X-Men.
Yes, love the X-Men.
Was your first introduction to the X-Men franchise through the Claremont Byrne issues?
My very first introduction that I actually learned about the X-Men was the cartoon Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. They did 3 X-Men episodes, and these characters just wowed me. There's a metal dude and a guy with claws and laser eye guy. You know, I couldn't learn their names fast enough.
Wolverine's voice in that episode was so weird.
Yeah, Australian accent for a Canadian superhero. But I didn't know. It's like, oh, dude, that claw guy from Australia. That's who Wolverine was for me at first. So these characters, I wanted to learn.
Wholly from down under.
Yes. So I wanted to learn more about these characters. So that's what sent me to read comics. It's like, I didn't really think about much comics, but that cartoon, and those episodes specifically, it's like, I want to know more about these X-Men guys. So I started with a 3-pack of Secret Wars comics that I bought at a Target. It had the X-Men on there, it had Spider-Man, it had Fantastic Four, it had Captain America. It's like, I recognize some characters, I have no idea who these other characters are, I want to know more. And that was a great moment. That's, I think, what we need in comics is the I want to know more moments.
Sure.
So that you go in and you get it, because now I have a wealth of stories to read. I'm jumping in the middle, because it's the 1980s. X-Men are in the 200s, so I started it on the Claremont, John Romita Jr. years.
Okay.
So I had to work my way backwards to get to the Byrne and the Cockrum and the Paul Smith stuff. But that was the fun of it. I could read X-Men stories in two directions. I could keep reading forward, but then I could also do detective work and learn about their past with whatever back issue I could find, or reprint, like classic X-Men, you know, when they started putting out the classic X-Men series. This will help me learn more about these characters that I love, and then just the whole Marvel universe opened up to me.
Those little grab bags of comics that you mentioned, they were great because you always knew the first issue on top of it. You're buying it for that, and then you're just hoping the other ones wouldn't be stinkers.
Yeah.
But back then, you'd get a Spider-Man, you might get a Captain America, you might get a Thor.
Yep.
And they were mostly one-and-done stories.
Yes.
So you didn't have to worry about, you know, having to wait a month and having to track down the other part of the story.
Yeah, with my grab bag, it was Secret Wars issues 7, 8, and 9. So I knew I was getting the middle of a story, but I didn't care. It's like I wanted to see the art.
Jumped right in.
So I just jumped right in. It's like, I don't know how they got here. I don't know what's happening, but I'm excited by it.
Wait, and 8 was when Spidey's new costume
Yes, the black
debuted.
costume,
So
yeah.
like the first time you read a Spider-Man comic was with the black costume?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I read issue 7, then
You did all this backward, Todd.
Yeah.
You did all this backward. You started with Claremont, Romita Jr., you went backwards. You're doing it all wrong.
My whole life has been doing everything backwards. I say I fail upwards. That's why I resonate with Peter B. Parker so much.
So we fast forward several years, you made it in the comics business, and then you got a call from Marvel to come draw the X-Men.
Yes, actually my big break into Marvel, I'd done a little bit of stuff through the 90s, just a 1 issue, 2 issue here or there, but what got me working regularly for Marvel was after I was done with Young Justice, I'd worked with a writer named Peter David, who I grew up reading his Spider-Man and Hulk comics, big fan of Peter David, and he wrote Young Justice, and we became friends working on that series. So in 2006, he was writing the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man series, and Mike Wieringo, one of the most awesome artists ever who we lost way too soon, he was leaving the book, and Peter asked, do you want to take Mike's place on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? I'm like, absolutely, I'd love that. So that's what got me working regularly for Marvel. And I did like 10 issues of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And then in 2014, after working on other projects, I get a call from the X office. Exactly, and at the X-Men editor, Daniel Ketchum calls. He's like, hey, Todd, Nick Lowe and I are talking, we got a new series, X-Men series. We were wondering if you're interested in drawing. We're doing a solo series on Nightcrawler. And I'm like, yes. You don't have to finish it. I said yes immediately. Before he even got to the lure of Nightcrawler, I'm like, I'm in. I'm not letting this one slip through my fingers. And then I found out Chris Claremont was writing it, and I was like, oh my gosh. It's like...
Did you hang up the phone and sit down and say, I need a moment here?
Yeah.
I need to take a breath?
I hurled, I came back, it's like, I told my wife, Dawn, you'll never believe who I just spoke with and what I'm gonna get to do here next year. So working with Chris Claremont, having grown up reading his comics, it's like a musician getting to jam with a Beatle or something like that, you know? It's like Chris Claremont is a comics writing legend who wrote the biggest X-Men stories that they're making the movies based on now, you know? Dark Phoenix and Days of Future Past, you know, these are iconic X-Men moments.
He steered that ship for several decades, from the 70s into the 90s.
Into the 90s, 17
it's kind
years.
of an unheard of run as a comics writer.
Yeah,
What he did.
So, so working with Chris was amazing. He wrote Marvel style. Everybody goes, oh,
Yeah,
when you get
ask you, how did that work? One, did you get the fanboy moment out of the way right away, or did you slowly
I had the
build up to
fanboy
it?
moment for like the first 6 issues. Like I was like, still like, oh my gosh. I'm drawing one of my favorite X-Men, written by one of my favorite X-Men writers. This is nuts. So yeah, it took me about 6 months to get past the fanboy moment.
And he did it Marvel style, so he gave you a script that left it open to your own interpretation?
Yes, yeah, so
Anyways.
for those that aren't aware, a writer can write full script, which is panel 1, here's all the action, here's all the dialogue. Panel 2, action, dialogue, panel 3. So they write it all out, you know exactly what's happening. Marvel style is kind of what like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby would do, where Stan has like, here's a basic idea, Jack Kirby takes it, runs with it, gives the pages to Stan, then Stan comes in and puts the dialogue. So that's the quote-unquote Marvel style. And so that's what I did with Chris. So people go, oh, Chris Claremont, that must have been a really dense, verbose script. And it's like, I'm doing Marvel style. I get maybe a paragraph, and then I just get to go to town. And my editor really pushed me on, tell the story your way. Don't just be beholden to what Chris has put down. Take it and push it farther. Challenge Chris on how to dialogue these pages. So I really got to do some problem solving, got to really tell a story with Chris. Instead of translating a story, I'm telling a story with him. So it helped me level up my storytelling game, which I really appreciate my editor pushing me in that way, and Chris being he was very cool with whatever I came up with. It's like, here's what I got, and he would just go to town with dialogue.
Did his openness to that help calm you down? Because I would imagine then you were still young, still very young in the business. It helped you relax a little bit and be able to say, okay, let me question some of the things that he's got in the script and let me push back a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I would always stay in communication. Like, we have this scene here, what if I did this, this, and this? And, you know, they'd say, yeah, cool, go for it, make it look cool. And so yeah, it really did help. The more I did it, the more I started to feel more confident in, I don't have to just do what the writer says. I can I want to respect what the writers put down, obviously, but I can also push it up another level, really bring that pulse-pounding Marvel magic to the visuals and come up with some new stuff. And I'd always put in like little bonus dialogue of like whatever I came up with. Here's kind of just to give Chris a note of what I was thinking. Here's what I thought Nightcrawler or Shadow King might be saying. Not that I ever expected him to use it, but the last line Nightcrawler says in the last issue of the last page, Chris used a portion of what I had written. So I co-wrote a line with Chris Claremont, which is just like, oh, I didn't realize that was on my bucket list, but it is now, check.
It's safe to assume that Nightcrawler is your favorite X-Man?
Actually, he's one of my favorites. My favorite is Kitty Pryde. I love Kitty Pryde. She's smart, she's strong in character. You know, she doesn't take guff from anyone. She's funny, she's a leader. And as you know, fans ask why, and I explain why this is why Kitty Pryde's my favorite, I realized my wife is much this way. So I'm a fan of Kitty Pryde because I'm a fan of my wife. So I see them being very similar in character. Just my wife doesn't have a pet dragon, though she wants one.
Which also makes Kitty Pryde the coolest
yes.
X-person. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, a pet dragon from outer space.
You win, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you finished inking.
Yes.
The character's really starting to come into focus here. You have the spider lines. And the eyes. The eyes are key for whenever you're drawing any Spidey characters,
yes.
correct?
Yeah, oh yeah. And there's been so many variations of the Spider-Man eyes. If you look at like the 1960s and 70s, there are very thin slits from Ditko to John Romita Sr., but then Todd McFarlane comes in the 1980s and makes them huge, and all of us kids, we flip out and go, sure. Oh my gosh, that looks so awesome. And so it's weird, it's been fun to see how Spider-Man would vacillate between thin eyes to thick eyes, and then getting really expressive with the eyes. Because it's a full face mask, which makes Spider-Man cool and mysterious, we can use it, changing the size of the eyes, we can convey emotion. I know Eric Larson really pushed that with like a little tiny slit and one big eye for like a confused Peter Parker. It's like there's no way scientifically that cloth could do that, but we suspend that disbelief because it's conveying an emotion of a character.
Matt Wagner says, it doesn't have to be right, it just has to look right.
Yes, exactly. So that's a really fun aspect of Peter. Then and like they say in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you know, anybody can be Peter Parker. With the Spider-Man mask, anyone can be under that, and that's what I think makes Spider-Man so cool. What appealed to the little kid that first discovered Spider-Man, I think I was like 3 or 4, it's like, who is this guy? It's like, it's all red, it's all blue with these giant black and white eyes. That could be me under that costume. And so being able to express with the eyes, and I love how they address that in the MCU with the Stark Tech filters. Loved how they came up with actual scientific idea of how to make that a plausible thing in real life.
What are you using to color Spider-Ham?
Let's see, I'm using Copic Markers. They're a high quality marker from Japan. Copic has a booth here on the convention floor. If you're interested in purchasing some markers, they have a pretty good deal, $4 a marker, which is cheaper than what they are at my art supply store. They are a little bit of a, you know, they're a little more of an expensive brand of marker, but they're the best quality from my experience. The ink is made to blend well. I am not being paid for this. This is not a Copic sponsored ad at all. It's just my testimony of having worked with this this medium here, really enjoy what they can do. They have a brush tip, so it's almost kind of gives like almost a watercolor effect meets markers. So I'll come in here with different layers and shades of red and orange to sculpt out Spider-Ham's his look, his mask here.
You've drawn Spider-Man various times for various projects,
yes,
including some for younger readers.
Yes.
Do you approach that a little differently, or do you approach the character the same and just let the story go where it goes?
More the latter. I just kind of approach it the same as if it was the Marvel 616 universe or like Spidey. I did the Spidey series, which was a 12-issue comic series that ran a couple of years ago. We did a 6-issue Comixology original for Marvel with that. And it was called Spidey School's Out. So it's the teenage Spider-Man. Not necessarily a kid's book, but it's definitely a book you could give a 7-year-old. It's classic teenage Spider-Man versus Shocker and Rhino and Vulture. And my approach to it is do it the way I would want to read it as an adult, keeping in mind that, you know, we don't want to get PG-13 or higher with it. Even PG-13 I think is still pretty safe for most viewers, at least in the Marvel universe. I know a lot of families take their kids to a PG-13 movie, but being very mindful that young readers might read this. But when I was a kid, I could pick up any issue of Amazing Spider-Man, and it was parent approved. You know, my mom's not going to yank it out of my hands and say, you know, what are you reading this garbage for? You know, it's a safe book. So kids, I think, want to read up. Whatever the older kids are reading, that's what they want. So I like books that are, all ages is kind of a term that can be like, most people just like, oh, it's written for kids. Where I think all ages should mean more, everyone can read it. It's safe to get to a kid, but it's interesting for an adult, you know? So that's my approach, because young kids want to read up. I don't think they want to read stuff that's played down to them. So they're always looking up to the older generation.
But along those lines, do you think, because there's been a whole generation of comic artists and writers who have grown up on the, you know, so-called dark age of comics, you know, where the comics were created largely for a more mature audience, do you think they don't have the ability to write for all ages like the people that we grew up reading and seeing? Because those, you know, back then, you know, like you said, the Spider-Man comics that you grew up reading, anybody could pick them up. I remember reading Spider-Man when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And you're right, you want to read up. But those people were writing towards a more open audience, as opposed to the last 25, 30 years, you've seen a lot of comics aimed at an older reader.
Right.
Do you think that makes it harder for them to write for all ages?
I think it could be a challenge, sure, absolutely. I think also part of it is those of us who grew up reading it, we're now writing it and creating it, so it's kind of growing up with us. So it's kind of a weird dance to do. It's kind of a weird give and take, push and pull to try to find that right formula that is edgy enough for an adult, but safe enough to give to a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old even. Because a lot of those all ages comics, they come and go real quick. And I think, all the books I've worked on, I feel safe given to a kid. Maybe some of the Deadpool, I'd probably go junior high and up, but
maybe not Deadpool, but Young Justice for sure.
Yeah. So and Young Justice, it was like they were thinking of a young audience, but Peter Dave and I did it for the love of the DC universe and the teens of the DC universe. These are teenagers. What is life like for them here in the late 90s, early 2000s, and just play to that. And if young readers can read it, and you know, adults could read it, and it was fun. It was a fun comic just on the sheer aspect of it being fun characters, fun stories. Let's have a good time. Let's also put them in through drama and superhero adventures and high stakes whenever possible as well. So it's just finding that right marriage, but with Spider-Man, he's so iconic. So I mean, it's marketed to everyone that he's a pretty safe character across the board. I think, for anyone to get into.
You know, we've talked about Young Justice a lot, and we've also mentioned that it's back in comic book form. Have you talked to DC? Do you have any interest in going back and drawing?
I loved my time doing the 5 years. I drew every issue of Young Justice, except for 2 issues. I drew 53 of the 55 issues, plus 3 bonus-sized Young Justice specials. So I definitely put in a lot of time with those characters. And loved them and loved those 5 years I did that series. So I would love to get a chance to work with the latest incarnation of Young Justice, absolutely. Have not spoken with DC about that yet. If anyone from DC is watching, hey, give me a call. Send me an email. So I'd love that opportunity.
You can find him right here for a few more minutes.
But Marvel's keeping me hopping, so it's like DC would have to catch me at the right time when I'm in between gigs, because Marvel has really been very kind to have another project for me, one after the other. So
what is following up your Cosmic Ghost Rider?
Nothing I can talk about just yet, but
ooh, very
yeah,
tantalizing.
Yeah, I try not to say anything until Marvel announces it. Then I can say, you know, what's next. So, definitely be looking for some covers for sure. I can definitely say that.
Is the cover work still creatively fulfilling for you? Because at this point, can you do covers in your sleep, because you've done so many? And it's easier than doing 22 interior pages.
It is easier than drawing, yes.
Says the guy who can't draw
20
anything.
pages. Well, it's less time. It's one image versus 20 pages when you have anywhere from 1 to 7 panels per page.
Sure, but it's the image that sells the book.
It is the trailer to the issue that you're about to read. You know, it's a kind of a different way to think. You're thinking of more of a kind of a movie poster sort of fashion instead of a storytelling sort of approach. It's just the fun of trying to find a new way to draw Spider-Man on a cover. That's the biggest challenge, because those of us who work with Spider-Man regularly, it feels like I've drawn him swinging in every way I think I know. So it's like, how can I find a new way to pose him that I haven't already done before, so it doesn't become clip art?
Sure. And then you've got to do the backgrounds, because he's a city guy.
Yes.
You can't just put him on a white background, because he's always swinging through the city.
Swinging through the city, exactly. Which I
what did you do there? What were you?
Oh yeah, so I use for the whites of Spidey's lenses, and for Spider-Ham's lenses on his eyes and even on his snout, I like to start with a little bit of blue. I like to make them reflective instead of just flat white. So I start with a little light blue, and then I come in with some cool gray here to soften it out a little bit, and try to get that reflection of the world around him. Just more of a very loose generalization. Just kind of gives his eyes a little more detail. And come in with a little bit of a darker shade to separate the bluish gray from the white for the horizon, and just gives us a little eye candy there for.
It's interesting watch you do that, because if I would see it for the first time as it was finished, I would just think it was the same color.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting the things that the artists do that the average fan won't even notice.
Yeah, so it's little touches here and there whenever we can. And then I like to come in with some cool gray and add some sculpting shadows on his face to give him a little more dimension, give him a little more volume on the page.
I always like to ask creators that I talk with what they're reading now. What are the 3 comics Todd Nauck is reading right now?
Amazing Spider-Man, Uncanny X-Men, and Heroes in Crisis from DC. I'm a big Booster Gold fan. I think I'm like 2 or 3 issues behind, so no spoilers, please. But that's been a really fun read.
Have you drawn Booster?
I have not. He is on my bucket list of characters I'd like to draw professionally. He's my favorite DC Universe character right now.
Booster?
Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, the Ted Kord Blue Beetle. The 2 of them in Justice League International, such fun stories. I love those stories.
DC has to talk to you about a bunch of things.
Yes, they do. I do. Once I get my foot back in the door with DC doing a run on Young Justice, you know, maybe a story arc, then it's time to pitch the Blue Beetle Booster Gold buddy cop series.
Okay, so I'm noticing the web lines on Spider-Ham here. It's interesting when you were talking about how they help.
Yeah.
Curves?
The curves, yeah. To show the form and mass, or the structure of.
It's impressive you did that without having a reference photo here, because you don't draw Spider-Ham that often.
No, but I draw Spider-Man often enough, so a lot of that plays in because it's going to arc over the forehead.
But that's a human.
That's true. So, but the general initial top of the head, but when I get to the cheeks here and the snout, then I have to really think things through. But growing up a Spider-Ham fan, I did a lot of Spider-Ham fan art as a kid. So I have enough Spider-Ham locked in the noggin here to
Have you shared that on Instagram?
How's that?
Have you shared that on Instagram?
I have not. I have to go through my old boxes of my teenage art and dig it out.
I'd like to see that.
Show that sometime. Yeah, I used to draw all the Marvel animal characters because they'd always have a backup feature in each issue of Spider-Ham with like a 4-page story of Goose Rider or Daredevil or Iron Mouse, the X-Bugs.
I forgot about
every Marvel character
Goose Rider.
Crocker
Wow.
Strange.
You're taking me back.
Yeah.
Goose Rider. That should be a commission request from somebody here. Please, somebody find him and make that commission request.
So I would do fan art of all those characters because I was really big into funny animal stuff as a kid, Ninja Turtles and stuff.
Are we doing geometry?
We're going to do some geometry. Yes, I'm going to find the hypotenuse of the bilateral hemogloba here. I like to just put in a little background element just to. Sorry, I mixed in some biology with my geometry there. This is why I don't do science. It would be mad science at best.
Now you've got to get this right because you're doing it with a marker, and if you mess it up, you can't really erase it.
You can't, no.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Now I'm actually terrified because now that you've said something, you know, like when you're driving and it's like the freeway is nice and clear, you never say, wow, traffic's really light, because as soon as you say that, everything grinds to a halt. This is that moment as well. It's like, don't mess up. Oh my gosh. Now I'm going to mess up. Though it won't be the first time I've messed up doing a SYFYWIRE art video. I was here last year and I did Artist Alley.
I do remember that.
And I was drawing an image of Impulse, finishing the inks. And I'm using a brush pen I'd never used before. And just the palm just blop, 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 splotched all over the image. Just like, and it's on the SYFYWIRE YouTube channel, so you can go watch me screw up an image, an illustration on.
That was practically finished.
Almost done. I was in the home stretch, and so yeah. So it's like,
you were a good sport.
You know, it's.
Did it again and you finished it?
I pulled back the veil of pros are humans too. We all make mistakes. Just what do? You either make it work or you start over. And in that case, I started over. But yeah, because I remember as a kid, I would see my favorite comic books, comic strips, cartoons, and figured they draw everything perfectly first time pencil or pen goes to paper, so that's what I tried to do. And it was very frustrating because that's not how art works. And but I would still keep at it, but I'd get frustrated. It's like, oh, come on, you can do this, you can be perfect. And realized, oh, it's not about being perfect, it's about going through the steps. You build the structure, you figure out the puzzle, and you work the steps to get to your ultimate goal. And so it's a journey, it's not perfection. It's like we just work at it so much and we practice it so much, we give the illusion of perfection, we give professionalism, but it's humans, imperfect humans, trying to do the best job we can. So that moment on SYFYWIRE last year was definitely showing the very human moment. And it's like, man, I have to be the guy that shows the world that we all make mistakes. Great.
Are you a guy when you're doing your, specifically panel work for, say, Cosmic Ghost Rider, do you erase a lot? Do you go back and you change the panels? You like the layout?
In the layout,
telling it?
Absolutely. In the layout stage, I'm trying to figure out how best to convey those shapes or of the panel, like what size shot. So I'll start sketching it out. No, change the idea. This would work better over there. Fortunately, I do my layouts digitally, so I don't have to erase. I just select it, size it up or down, move it right or left. Keeps me working further, faster. Gives me more opportunities to be creative in different ways. So yeah, definitely sketching it out is such a key
Do you do the cover layouts digitally as well?
I do, yes. Yeah, it's great because if I realize, I made Spider-Man's head a little too small, instead of erasing it and redrawing it, just select it, size it up a little bit. There we go, that's the right size. Keep moving forward to the next part.
What do? You print out the blue lines?
Print out the artwork on blue lines, then do inks traditionally on the artboard.
I mentioned this so any art collectors out there know that Todd Nauck is still selling original art.
Yes, got lots of pages at my...
That's important. That's important.
At my table here.
Broke my heart yesterday when he revealed he does all digital now.
Oh, all digital, yeah. Yeah, I like having a finished piece. I like having something I can hold still. I'm learning how to ink digitally in case I need that skill. But if I can ink traditionally, I always want to try to have a finished piece of artwork when I'm done, if I can.
Well, you're an artist known for making deadline and for being quick. So that's one of the advantages that people look to digital for, is to be able to work faster.
Yes.
And you've always been able to crank out really nice art.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've only been working digitally here for about 2 years. I'm still learning a lot. It's still not fast for me. I draw traditionally much faster than I do digitally. Layouts, I finally gotten to where that's a key part of my process, but drawing traditionally is still, if the deadline's tight, I gotta draw traditionally. Do my sketches digitally, print them out, work off on top of that.
You're clearly the outlier.
Yeah, so, but when I was a kid, my first comic book convention, Dallas 1989, fresh out of high school, go to a convention, it's like, finally I can talk to professionals and editors. I can get the information I've been yearning for these past 4 years. So I'm asking questions. I'm eavesdropping on all sorts of pro conversations, or what I assume might be pro conversations. I don't know who's who. I'm in line for Carrie Gamble's autograph session. And Carrie Gamble drew Power Man and Iron Fist and X-Men comics back in the 80s, a phenomenal artist. So I'm like, but in the 80s, we didn't know who the artist looked like. There was no social media or Instagram or anything, and Wizard Magazine wasn't out where they would show photos of people.
So you're right. We had no idea who anybody but Stan Lee was.
Yeah, Stan Lee, and that's it. So I see this dude standing by the wall. I go, is this the Carrie Gamble line? He goes, yeah, I think it is. All right, cool. Get my comics ready. So Carrie Gamble sits down for his autograph. You're the dude I just asked, is this Carrie Gamble's line? And he was real, and I've gotten to meet him since then and talk to him as a pro, but I'm listening in on conversations, and I overhear someone say, John Byrne says Marvel rule is 2 pages a day. I'm like, wow, if John Byrne says that. John Byrne drew incredible X-Men, fantastic. He drew everybody in the Marvel universe through the 70s through 90s. So it's like, if John Byrne says that, well, I guess I know what I gotta do. I gotta learn how to do 2 pages a day. So I taught myself how to do that. So when Rob Liefeld hired me, and I start giving him 2 pages a day, he's like, whoa, what's...
Were you the only guy in that studio who could do 2 pages a day because they were notorious for being late with their books?
And when the books were late, they gave them to me. The book's late, give it to Todd. So I was chained to my drafting table and just scripts piling up as I'm...
You buried the lead in how Rob hired you. So I can do 2 pages a day. Why? You could do 2 pages a day. You're hired. Because that was the big problem then.
Yeah. Well, he didn't know I could do 2 pages a day till I got into the studio. They gave me my first Bad Rock script, and it's like, all right, let's do what John Byrne says, 2 pages a day. That's what we do as pros, right?
John Byrne says so.
John Byrne says so. That's what John Byrne says. I'm going to trust the guy who's drawn everybody in the Marvel Universe, because I want to be that guy.
If you're going to follow advice in comics, probably a good move.
And who knows if John Byrne said that? I don't even know, it's just something I overheard someone say. It could have been some random dude making something up, or he misheard something, so I don't even know if I was operating on real or correct information. But as an 18-year-old kid who was dying for any info, I took it all as gospel, and like I said, bailed myself upwards.
It has served you well. Okay.
Yeah, we're pretty much done. Right? I just need to put my autograph on here. And I think this will be a part of the charity auction tonight.
Tonight or tomorrow?
Or sorry, tomorrow night, yeah. I believe so. So,
well, some lucky winner's gonna win a really, really nice Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham drawing. That is amazing. Penciled ink and colors.
Here in just shy of...
Show it off.
Oh yeah, so...
Look at that.
Don't know if y'all saw that on the screen. Camera 2, there we go.
Todd Nauck, thank you so much for being here and doing this. This was
a lot of fun. I had a good time talking with you. Thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you had
remember,
fun.
Keep following all the fun here at Emerald City Comic Con. Use the hashtags It's a Fan Thing and hashtag ECCC. And coming up next on the live stage, the Dream Daddy Creative Team.